So we're just about ready to plant our first garden bed of the year, and we have a few crops going in today. We got some onions and some peas and also some spinach and some salad mix. And what we're doing today is we're trying to mitigate weeds further into the growing season. And so we're doing that by using a few techniques that we learned and developed and experimented with over the last few years. So last year, the walkways in between our garden beds we covered with wood chips. And the idea for the wood chips is it holds moisture on your garden bed, but it also prevents weeds from growing up in your walkways. And also it's actually kind of nice, it keeps your shoes from getting muddy every time you go in to check the garden. And it worked fairly well, but we still had weeds coming up through it by about mid-August. And so a little bit more research online. A lot of people are suggesting putting cardboard down, 3 or 4 or 5 layers of cardboard in your paths and then covering it with wood chips. So we've been squirreling away cardboard all winter, and we probably have enough to do the garden. And so we're going to put the cardboard down, then the wood chips, and hopefully that mitigates all our weed issues. Because what we were finding last year was we were getting weeds coming right in the middle of August at the height of kind of our harvest season and just a very busy time on the farm. So if we can, with some proper planning at the beginning of the growing season, mitigate some time in the busy season, then it's worthwhile. So let's go over a few of the other things that we're going to do. So we have 34-inch wide beds with about 14-inch wide paths between them, which are covered in wood chips. And here's one bed. We got some string run just so we can make sure that we keep it straight, which is important when you're doing some tilling. And we should talk about tilling just for a second. Our plan with this bed is we tilled it last fall very lightly. And what we're doing first thing in the spring is we're covering it with some of this really nice compost. Just a shovel basically every foot. And we kind of spread that out, and then we're going to come in and till that. And that's going to be really nice and aerated soil. And once it's tilled, we're going to come in with some more compost yet again, and we're going to apply about a 2-inch layer of compost along the whole top of this bed. And the reason again is weed control. So when you put compost, especially manufactured compost or made by a reputable dealer, it's probably going to be weed free. So once they cook it to something like 180 degrees Fahrenheit, that cooks all the weed seeds in it, and it makes a great amendment for your garden. What I like to do is put a 2-inch layer on the top of the entire bed, and that covers the weed seeds that are in your garden bed, and it should cover them enough that most of them won't grow. So you can probably, using this technique, expect only have to weed once or twice during the entire season. And the other thing is we're trying to create permanent beds. So the idea for this entire garden is to grow about enough food that would sustain a family, or about 8 to 12 people, actually almost an extended family. And it's going to be about 1/5 to 1/4 of an acre, so it's fairly sizable. So this garden is up on a bit of a hill, which has a lot of advantages. But one of the disadvantages is it has a lot of wind. And even on an early morning like today, where it's not that windy, it's still quite challenging to lay this cardboard down. So I've got some scrap lumber there that I've been using just to put on. I'm kind of working it ahead of me as I lay the cardboard, put some boards on top of it to hold it, and then slowly work my way with the wood chips to cover the cardboard and move the boards down. So that's just a little trick that you can use to make this job a lot easier, because when you're in Nova Scotia, if you want to wait for a day without wind, you might be waiting a while. Yeah, this is nice stuff. I'm gonna get a little more on here, but you can flatten it out as you go. You don't want too much slope to the bed. You want it flat, really. If it has too much of a slope on this particular bed, it's not going to get the morning sun. So just something to keep in mind. So there you have it. It's a really interesting technique. The no-till method, which I've kind of incorporated into more of a traditional vegetable bed. I really like the wood chips with the cardboard underneath it. I think it's going to pay dividends in terms of weed management. And putting that 2 inches or so of compost on top of the tilled bed, I think will help suppress any of remnant weed seeds that were in the garden bed from years past. And seed can stay a long time in the soil waiting for the right conditions, so it's really something you always have to be keeping in mind and managing for. So it took about 3 hours to get the wood chips down on both sides and to spread the compost on this bed. Using the cardboard's kind of a slow process, but overall I think it's really worth the time investment for what it saves you down the road in terms of weed management, but also you get a really excellent yield from this type of vegetable growing. And a 50-foot bed like this with carrots, you're probably going to get around 75 to 80 pounds of carrots, so it can yield some really good numbers. And this particular bed last year had, I think it was turnips. There was turnips here and pumpkins there, and both of those are fairly heavy feeders of the soil. So we're going to plant legumes in these two beds, which legumes are beans and peas and some other cover crops like clovers and buckwheat. In terms of vegetables that you grow for human consumption, peas and beans are kind of the main ones. And they're an excellent crop to plant the following year after you've had some heavy feeding crops. So we're going to plant some peas and beans in these two. We've started the peas in the greenhouse in our soil blocks, and we'll be planting 2 rows on the bed of peas, spaced at about 12 inches apart. So it'll be interesting to see how they work this year. They'll be going in the ground in about 2 weeks, as the seed hasn't quite germinated fully yet. Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed the video and maybe learned something. It's certainly not the only way to grow vegetables, and I'm sure there's lots of things you can do to improve what I'm doing, but this method seems to work for me. I've tweaked a few different methods in the past, and this is kind of what I've settled on. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you like the video, please like and feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.